Hello and welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, your trusted guide to decoding current affairs for UPSC one day at a time. It's June 3rd, 2025 and today's edition brings two important deep dives tailored for mains 2025. Firstly, we will be charting India's civil aviation achievements, growth, infrastructure and global connectivity. Then we will be trying to simplify the President's rule in the country, the constitutional provisions, process and the recent relevance. And for prelims 2026, we have lined up simplified articles covering a wide range of areas from India's new EV manufacturing scheme and a new India-Paraguay deal to economic indicators like the monetary policy rate, outlook and the manufacturing PMI, along with some important updates on the AUKUS and the UK. So let's dive in. Hello guys, I hope you all are doing well. I hope your preparation is also going fine with this interesting episodes of current affairs every day. Without any delay, we'll be starting with the very first article with an important focus on our Indian aviation sector on the backdrop of the recent statements made by our Prime Minister on our aviation sector. And this was generally as an address at the IATA's 81st Annual General Meet and the World Air Transport Summit, which was held at Bharat Mandapam from June 1st till today, that is June 3rd. And this is why we will be looking into the various aspects of the sector, because from the prelims perspective, we need to be aware of the various initiatives from an economic perspective, and also from the perspective of the GS3, we need to touch upon the various infrastructural sector where we have the aviation and the airport structure of our country. So when we start this article, we'll be starting with the recent trends and the key statistics pertaining to the aviation sector, which is actually a very booming sector in the country. Because according to various news reports, according to the various government data, we understand that India is actually the third largest market of the entire aviation sector of the entire world, because we have to look into the total passenger traffic that amounts to around 376 million passengers, and this is poised to actually have a market value of around $14.78 billion with the potential to reach around $26 billion by 2030. So this makes India the third largest market after the US and the China. And here we have to understand also the number of operational airports in the country that has went up from 74 just around 10-12 years back to 149 airports right now. And we are also targeting to reach this figure at 220 plus by 2030, which is a very ambitious one. And when we talk about the inclusivity of our Indian aviation sector, we also have around 15% of the total pilots as women. This is according, much more higher than the 5% world average. And also we have to understand this is 3 times the world average. Now, when we talk about not only the passenger aspects, well, we try to understand the implications of freight traffic via our aviation sector. Our aviation sector is growing with reference to 8 to 10% in terms of freight trafficking. And at the end of the day, when it comes to sustainability, green airports amount to around 73 in the country, where they are actually running on 100% renewable energy. So this is how our Prime Minister also came to praise the aviation sector, where he made some important observation on India's schemes, roles and opportunities within the sector itself. We'll be looking at one by one, and remember here, this important 2 slides are extremely crucial for your mains, because we have so many data, we have so many schemes, and also we have so many important statements which you can replicate directly in your upcoming mains. Now, when we talk about the Prime Minister's speech, the very first thing he told that in India, we have the 3 pillars which are driving India's aviation sector. Firstly, we have an aspirational population, because we simply are home to the world's largest population, and this will be spurting a lot of demand in the coming years. Next, we also have so many applications of startups, of new technologies such as artificial intelligence, robotics, and even sustainability and clean energy, which is making our entire economic and the aviation sector a very innovative one and a very young one. Next, also we have so many pro-industrial policies, such as the various new agreements that we signed or the new acts that we actually passed. This is making the entire aviation ecosystem very friendly place to do business for the business houses too. Now, when we come to the legal and institutional measures, the Prime Minister also highlighted that recently we have had the Indian Aircraft Act, which is trying to streamline the entire aviation sector according to the growing demand and also according to the supply constraints coming from the various airlines, because mostly we have to understand that in India we actually operate on leased aircrafts. So that is why in this entire act we are trying to simplify the process. Also, when we talk about the leasing of aircrafts, it is mainly the various countries, mainly the Western countries, which lease their aircrafts to Indigo, SpiceJet and various other airlines in the country. So according to that, we actually are a signatory to the Cape Town Convention, which is trying to lay down the norms, procedures, penalties and the various other aspects for aircraft leasing. India is also signatory to that. In the gift city of Gujarat, we are also having a hub or a central place where these lease operational companies are present at a very concessional rates when it comes to their investment in land or various opportunities. Indian government is helping out of the way for them. And at the end of the day, we also are trying to manufacture aircrafts in the country according to 2025-26 budget. Next, when we talk about the infrastructural growth and the investment boom in this sector, nothing can reflect better the growth of airports in the country from 2014 that we have seen as of now. Now we have around 162 airports. That is a jump from 74 airports in 2014. Now we also have added 2000 plus new aircrafts. And these are the various aircrafts in various corners of the country where the various Indian airlines are ordering from the Western nations to cater to the Indian population. Next, we also have the maintenance, repair and overhaul sector. Now, this sector is not dealing about ticketing or the airline fares and all those things. It is actually talking about how we can maintain, repair the aircrafts because they need a continuous amount of maintenance. Also, we need to repair the various parts, or in cases of some technical difficulties, we need some expert sectors. So this is where the MRO sector is coming together, where in 2014 we had 96 such units in the country or 96 such companies in the country. Right now we have around 154 and we are targeting to reach this MRO economy to around $4 billion by 2030, where we are trying to transform India into a potential hub where other countries can also repair their aircrafts in the country and we can actually earn some money, we can actually generate some jobs and help in the economic growth of our country. Next, when it comes to technology, India is not behind. India is actually far ahead when it comes to various technologies such as DigiYatra, as we have seen. If you have traveled to various airports, you can actually download DigiYatra, you can scan your boarding pass, you can upload your Aadhaar card or any other government details, and you can have a seamless entry by just scanning your face, your biometrics on the screen just before the entry of the airport. So this is making those long queues of checking and also inside the airport when it comes to security checking much more seamless and easy for the passengers. So all of you who are traveling to plan, you can actually plan using DigiYatra, which will save your time because there are no documents involved here. Now, when we talk about various other sections where he mentioned about the Make in India program, now our Prime Minister is focusing not only Make in India but Design in India. Now, if you have wondered about one thing, consider about the iPhones. These iPhones are designed in California, in the US, in the Silicon Valley, but they are manufactured all around the world. Now, when it comes to the profits, do the profits go to the manufacturing country or to the designing country, that is to the Silicon Valley or to the US, where the Apple is headquartered in? So it is actually to the designing countries. When you try to design iPhones, when you try to design semiconductors, when you try to design aircrafts or even the EV vehicles, right? We actually try to build everything from scratch. We try to scale the design from the very basic components to manufacturing and then to marketing and to sales. So that is why the Prime Minister right now is not only focusing on manufacturing, because if you're manufacturing solely, you are stuck in the supply chain, right? But when you try to design, you are trying to start an entire new episode yourself. So that is where we are trying to focus on market to value to chain leader, because we are trying to design, manufacture and maintain. Remember, we are trying to also have a proper MRO sector, that is maintain, repair and overall sector in the country, where we can repair airlines, where we can repair aircrafts. We are also have to manufacture them according to budget 2024-25 and also 2026. We have to also design right now, right? Because we have to attract the global investments. We have a lot of amount of labor resources which we should be trying to utilize properly. Next, also when it comes to India's civil aviation achievements, our Prime Minister gave those straightforward facts. Simply, we are the third largest domestic aviation market globally. We have over 240 million passengers every year, which is going to reach 500 million people by 2030 as airlines and their fares become more affordable. Also, we have a very important scheme known as the UDAN scheme, which is a scheme to regionally have air connectivity using small aircrafts, even helicopters in some locations, where we should be having the aspiration to not only have airports in top tier cities or some big towns. We should be also trying to link the small towns, remote locations of the country via regional aircrafts. So this is where 15 million plus passengers have actually flown under the UDAN scheme. Also, the air cargo is estimated to reach around 10 million metric tons by 2030. Now, when we talk about drones, India is not behind in drones. As we already know, we have so many startups in this sphere, where from agriculture to e-commerce or you name any sector, our drones are everywhere. These are also used by the women self-help groups in the country under the scheme of Drone DD scheme. As you also have known in the recent news, right? There are so many DDs in the country who are using the drones for education, for their agricultural purpose and so many other reasons. And this will be helping them to be financially and digitally included, which is also not only apart from the women pilots that we have. Also, we are having drone pilots in the country in our rural areas, which is a very, progressive development. And at the end of the day, when it comes to safety, standards and sustainability, India is not behind, because Indian aviation sector is actually in alignment with the ICAO global safety norms, which India is actually proud of. Next, we also have the Delhi Declaration, which actually was adopted for the aviation safety parameters, and also at the end of the day, we are trying to have sustainable sector. Apart from this, we have so many other schemes. For example, firstly, we have a national policy on aviation, that is the National Civil Aviation Policy, which is having the various aspirations to transform India to a MRO hub, also with reference to various taxation aspects, international expansion aspects. So this policy is a umbrella policy for that. Next, we also have the NABH, the Next Gen Airports for Bharat Nirman. So this is actually in response to the growing demand of the aircrafts in the country, right? Because of the growing population and the aspirations. That is why we have this Next Gen Airport scheme. Next, we also have the Make in India, the aviation component of Make in India, where be the components, be the systems or the various airport infrastructure, we are trying to have a proper strategy in place. Also, we have the Gagan, that is a GPS-aided geo-augmented navigation, which is trying to give support to the air traffic control in a proper tracking, monitoring and assisting the airlines in managing their aircraft during their air course. And this is actually a collaboration, a healthy collaboration between the ISRO and the Airports Authority of India. Also, when we talk about how the aviation sector is having the various collaboration with the other sectors in the country, we have the Krishi Udan scheme, which is a very important scheme to reduce the loss of perishable items in the agricultural sector. We have so many fruits and vegetables which easily perish after a matter of few weeks to months, where we can actually maintain them in our warehouses, but the warehouses do not have wheels, they cannot move. So because we need a movable warehouse in the case of a plane or a railway cargo. We need to transport these kind of perishable items to other parts of the country. In this particular direction, the Krishi Udan scheme is a very important one. And apart from this, the government has taken various other measures such as permitting 100% FDI in the aviation sector. We also have the aircraft leasing and financial hub at the Gift City, which recently has been set up, and they are trying to rival various countries such as Singapore, Hong Kong, based on this kind of conventions, and even the Netherlands and the Ireland who are much ahead in the leasing operations. And at the end of the day, India is also part of the open sky policy in terms of advocating the open skies for free transport and passage of airlines. So this is how we have to look into the various government initiatives that the government of India has taken over a period of time. But obviously, with every sector, there are some challenges. Here also, we have a set of challenges, some major challenges. Firstly, when we talk about the issues, we have a grounded fleet of around 160 plus planes, which are not operational at all because of the various bankruptcy or the losses, financial losses the airlines face. And this is mainly due to the capacity crisis in the country as of now, because we know that 2020, 21, 22 and a little bit of 23 was suffering from the ill effects of the COVID pandemic, where the passenger flight demand was not high, firstly due to the virus and the fears of the virus, and obviously due to the lower incomes of the country. Right? So this is why many airlines actually faced, and even right now they are facing financial issues. And here you can understand that in India we have 500 or 5 lakh passengers in a single day. 500,000 or 5 lakh passengers in a single day. And here, Indigo is having 60% share, and they're making around 8.1 thousand crore profit. But look at the other airlines here. Air India Group, owned by Tata, Akasha Air, which is not yet profitable, SpiceJet, which is having losses. So these are generally due to these reasons because of the rising, fuel costs, because the jet fuel costs are around 30 to even 70% of the total flight, of a single time. Next, obviously, we try to import this jet fuel, aviation turbine fuel from other countries, where the rupee depreciation or say the currency exchange applications come into play, because we generally buy in dollars wherever rupee depreciates, and this affects the lease payments. We have a duopoly in the country where we have Tata and Indigo owning 60% and 20% respectively, where we have a less competition with reference to the various other aircrafts. But between these two companies, we have fierce competition between the fares and everything, and they also have a high degree of power over their fares, and that is why the fares right now are actually quite high. This was one reason. Second reason is actually the high aviation turbine fuel taxes, which eat up around 40 to 50% of your fares. So this increases ticket price, and this is not under the GST. And in the international aviation sector, these are actually standardized as a part of the taxation system. Next, we have a pilot or engineer shortage, where this is actually leading to various delays of recent times. And also, we need around 1 million plus skilled workers by 2030. Next, we have a weak regional connectivity despite a successful Udan scheme, because we only have 76 new airports as of now since 2016. So this means that we need to fully try to have effective Udan scheme. So this is where we have to take off right now. We have to adopt some way forward and some suggestions. Firstly, we have to try to expand the infrastructure, also the amount that we spend on the airports and the various aircrafts, where we need to focus on having 200 plus new airports by 2030. And as you can see of the Prime Minister, in 2024-25, he has actually tried to inaugurate so many new terminal buildings at existing airports of Varanasi, Agra, Darbhanga, Bagdogra, and also new airports have been inaugurated at Sarsawa, Rewa, and Ambikapur. Right, so we have these new airports. We also need to bring the ATF under the GST, which will be reducing the costs. Next, we need more and more amount of maintenance hubs of the airports, of also the airlines, which we should be targeting to reach $4 billion by 2030. We need to have sustainable aviation by having better amount of sustainable aviation turbine fuel, hydrogen planes which are green in nature, and at the end of the day, we need more skill development of our pilots and the engineers in the country. So all these steps will be ensuring that India will be taking off, aviation sector will be taking off. So this is where we actually have a question for all of you. You practice this, and now let me show you some PYQs here. You solve this 2025 PYQs which appeared in this year's prelims examination. Let me know the answer positively in the comments. And also you can actually look at 2017 PYQ. So now we'll be moving on to the next one. Guys, in the next article, we have the important topic of President's Rule. This article will be serving as a basic revision for all of you who have already read about this one, and will be a new refresher for the people who will be starting this topic for the very first time. So let me simply break down the context for you firstly. Recently, a delegation of 10 MLAs from Manipur Assembly made the governor of the state of Manipur, and they pressed for the formation of a viable government because they have been under the President's Rule since February 2025. And this is actually a very important scenario for them, and also a very important topic for India's federalism. This is where we have to talk about prelims, where we have Indian polity and governance, and GS2 where we have Indian constitution and its significant provision. Here the significant provision is actually a situation of emergency. Now here, when we talk about President's Rule, this is also known by the name of state emergency or constitutional emergency, which is dictated under the 356 article of our Constitution of India, which actually typically states or means the direct central control of the state government, because maybe the government of the state failed to comply with the constitutional norms or the constitutional requirements. Because in the constitution of our country, we have two primary grounds for constitutional situation here, that is a constitutional emergency, which is also the President's Rule. So what are these two situations? This has been highlighted in Article 356 and Article 365. Now firstly, look at Article 355 here. Article 355 is telling that it is a duty of the central government to protect the states against any external aggression and internal disturbance. Apart from this, the union, the central government must also ensure that the administration, that the governance in that particular state is actually following the constitutional norms, constitutional standards, that is maintaining proper rule of law, due process of law, and various other parameters. So if at all this situation is not maintained, the president can assume the state administration. That means the central government can take over the state administration, that is the union can have control over the executive powers. The parliament can actually exercise the same powers of the state legislative assembly of that particular state. So this is how we can understand the center can try to assume the state administration. Next, also the president can actually declare the governance failure in this manner if the state do not respect some of the center's directives. Sometimes the central government would be sending some important directives, instructions to the state government to follow. If they do not follow and that actually is a major lapse, the president can also in his own best judgment under Article 365 assume the administration of the state. So this is how we can actually try to understand here the various constitutional grounds that dictate the President's Rule. Now who will be governing the state? Now here we have to note a very important thing. Now here when the governor will be saying that there is no constitutional provision which is maintained or there is a constitutional failure in the state, he can actually send a report to the president, and this report, let me tell you, is a very important report which is not made public, but this is a very important report for the president to take action to enforce President's Rule in that particular state. But it is to be noted again that this report is not mandatory. President can himself also assume the control of the state under Article 356. So here, after this takeover, who will be governing the state? The governor will be actually running the state on the behalf of the president. So he can actually have the council of ministers of the state government dismissed or dissolved, and on the behalf of the president, with actually the chief secretary of the state or with any people who will be appointed by the governor, right? They will be trying to manage the entire state, and the state assembly may be dissolved or they can be kept under suspended animation. So for a period of time, they will not be able to function. So here there are two instances of proper use of President's Rule and improper use of President's Rule. You can pause the screen. You can even look at it in the handout to have a very good idea about what actually constitutes a proper precedence rule. In this case, the precedent rule is justified, but in these cases, the precedent rule is not justified, because we have to understand when we talk about the proper usage here, in cases of hung assembly where we do not have a proper majority, or where the majority party is declining to form the government, or when the government cannot find any coalition, where also if the states are not listening to the centre's directive, or in terms of various internal subversion, where a state is deliberately acting against the law of the constitution, or a physical breakdown, that is, the government is willfully, intentionally willing to discharge their duties. And obviously in the cases of natural disaster, epidemic or war, these are all the grounds for precedence rule. Right? Now here, when we talk about the improper use, now the improper use, where we can actually understand how this precedence rule can become an issue. For example, if the governor is recommending without possibility of forming an alternative government, or when the governor is taking decision without any floor test, correct, for testing the confidence of the house, or when the ruling party suffered a massive defeat, as that was taken place in 1977 and 80, when this, with reference to various state emergencies, the, ruling party actually assumed power. Also with reference to the various maladministration or corruption, or the various financial condition of the state which has gone into disarray. Correct? So in this cases also precedence rules should not be imposed. Also with reference to various other features that we can see here, which are the improper rule. So this is actually trying to bring us to the now issue of how we have to approve the precedence rule and what shall be the duration. Now students, keep this in mind. Now these are the sections where we need to memorize some facts, that when cases of precedence rule, the parliament must be approving the same within 2 months, and with parliament I generally mean the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha both. And here this passing must be via simple majority. Now imagine a situation between these 2 months, if the Lok Sabha is dissolved, so the new Lok Sabha should be passing the same within 30 days after the new Lok Sabha has been constituted, but in the meantime the Rajya Sabha must be approving the same here. Now, according to 44th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1978, the extension or say the duration of the precedence rule was modified, where initially for 6 months, the precedence rule can be extended every 6 months up to a maximum of 3 years. And also within these 3 years, if you want to extend beyond 1 year, that can only be possible if there is a national emergency in the country, or the Election Commission of India is giving a certificate that elections cannot be conducted in that particular state because of some internal dispute or some constitutional machinery failure. So in only those cases, precedence rule can be stretched beyond that 1 year framework. Now, when it comes to revocation of the precedence rule, it is very easy to revoke it, because the president can easily do the same without any parliamentary approval. Now, we have to now understand, in this article, there are so many issues which are mentioned. And here also B.R. Ambedkar, when he actually debated this in the Constitutional Assembly, he supported the precedence rule because he thought that it would be a dead letter and only should be used in emergency cases, as the name emergency is suiting it. But here, we have seen so many cases over the years, as we can see. Right? Punjab was actually the very first state where the emergency was, this particular precedence rule was enforced. But over a period of time, right, we have seen so many phases, such as first, second, third, fourth and fifth phases. And across all these phases, we have some issues. For example, there are some states in 1970s who were dissolved on the chief minister's advice, despite some majority or doubtful majority. Also, if we look at the various other phases, precedence rule was used for political expediency, because the majority or say the union parties found it more convenient for the state parties to be also aligned with their national and state aspirations. So that is why this was actually a way of taking over the state government, despite them not having any constitutional breakdown. They were constitutionally fine, their administration was fine, but still they were taken over. Also, in 2005 and 2016, we have had some important Supreme Court judgments where the Supreme Court struck down the wrongful use of the president's rule in Bihar, Uttarakhand, Arunachal Pradesh. And finally, in Manipur 2025, we are having this kind of issue from 2025 February. So this is how we have to now understand what are the implications or the impacts of the president's rule. The very first impact is that firstly, they are often used for political gains, as we have seen right now. It is very easy for the majority party, if they have a good amount of majority in the Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha, they can easily try to use this to captivate political power. Next, they also try to undermine federalism, because here the entire state administration, their executive, their legislative power is taken by the president and the parliament respectively. And this is where we have to understand what will be the implication of the council of ministers who are democratically elected by the state people. Next, we also need to understand that if at all the president's rule is in force, this is actually a source of a governance paralysis, because the day-to-day administration, the day-to-day governance cannot be easily be taken care of in cases of president's rule or in cases of any emergency. Because we have to understand governance is best administered at the state, the district and at the local levels. And it is actually a very important thing that we have to ensure regarding the smooth administration, smooth functioning of the governance. Next, we also have an ambiguity of the definition of what is a constitutional breakdown. Because unless and until we have a proper defined definition of constitutional breakdown, the governments over a period of time will be easily be enforcing president's rule. And at the end of the day, we have so many instances, even the courts, the High Court, the Supreme Court has actually commented on the misuse of the governor during president's rule. So this is how we have to now look at some of the Supreme Court judgments in this case. And finally, the way forward are some key recommendations. Firstly, when we talk about president's rule, S.R. Bommai case cannot be ignored of 1994, where the judicial review that was enacted in the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act was upheld, that president's rule is subjected to judicial review. Also, the Supreme Court told that only constitutional breakdown is the permissible ground, not merely law and order breakdown or any other breakdown. And this should be justifying Article 356. And also it prevented the dissolution of the assembly till Parliament approves the rule. So this was a very important provision. Next, in the Rameshwar Prasad case of 2006, the Supreme Court actually tried to have the dissolution of Bihar Assembly declared as unconstitutional. In the Gujarat Mazdoor Sabha case of 2020, President rule was valid only if constitutional machinery fails according to the Supreme Court. So these are the various terms we have to keep in mind. Now, when we talk about the key recommendations, firstly, we have so many commissions. According to the Sarkaria Commission, the Sarkaria Commission recommended that the government or the union government must be using president's rule only as a last resort. Also, the governor's report or later the parliament must be giving an alternate course of action. And at the end of the day, the governor's report, which is a very important, a confidential report, must be made public, because governor actually wrote something on that proposing the president's rule. So the people must be knowing what are the various grounds that were proposed by the governor to the president. So it must be a speaking document. Next, the Puche Commission also gave recommendation to localize the provision of the president's rule only in some affected areas and not into the entire state, where also we should be having a time limit of not more than 3 months of president's rule. Next, the Interstate Council under Article 263 also kind of recommended that the proclamation must be ratified within 1 month and reduce the timeline from 2 months to 1 month, and there must be a special majority for the same. As of now, we are only using simple majority for a very serious thing such as a president's rule or state emergency. And at the end of the day, the National Committee to review the working of the Constitution, it also is kind of proposing that this provision must be used sparingly, listening to the words and advice of the B.R. Ambedkar, the father of our constitution. Also, state legislative assembly, according to the recommendation, should not be dissolved before the proclamation is approved by the parliament. So these are the various suggestions that you should be giving in your answers in this particular topic. Now, there is a PYQ from 2017 for all of you. You let me know positively the answer in the comments. Also, in this picture, you can see how many times the precedent rule has been imposed in Indian states, which can serve as a very good introduction to this mains practice question which you can answer. Now, we'll be moving on to the simplified articles. Guys, in the simplified articles, we have very important initiatives today. We'll be starting with the center notification on the recent guidelines on the electric car production scheme. Now, this particular scheme is actually known as the scheme to promote manufacturing of electric passenger cars in India. And this is very important when it comes to sustainable development from PLM's perspective. Also from GS3 perspective, we need to know what are the various changes in the industrial policy of our country. And here we are also dealing with the infrastructural sector, where we have to talk about the recent scheme to actually have more cars, from other countries to be imported into the country. Apart from that, to also simultaneously have domestic production. Now, we have in the recent news heard about Elon Musk, about various other, say, car companies and their owners commenting on India's high tariffs or import tariffs for the ready-made cars from abroad into India, where they actually had to pay 70% to 100% of the overall car value. For example, say, if a Tesla car is 1 crore rupees in value, right? So, anyone from India, if you want to buy a Tesla car, you have to pay 2 crore rupees because there is 100%, for example, customs on your imports of your electric car. So that is why many investors were not enthusiastic about entering the Indian markets. So to promote more introduction of those cars into the Indian markets, we have right now reduced the import duty. Actually, we have tried to reduce it to 15% from, 70 to 100%, which we have currently on the imported cars, and even those cars which are completely built in units, or these are complete cars themselves. We should not be disassembling and assembling them in the country. Next, with reference to this import, we have a quota here that is up to 8,000 EVs per year for 5 years is a quota. Also, when it comes to the minimum investment, it has to be around $500 million, and this amounts to 4,150 crore, and we have to actually know what counts as an investment also. Now, these investments must be in new plant machinery and equipment, also in various associated systems such as power systems, cooling systems. It can be also with reference to the designing and research of engineering components, with reference to new factory buildings up to 10% of the cost, and also with reference to building charging infrastructure in the country. But now we have to also understand which are not eligible at investment, such as expenditure on the land. So this is where we have to understand are the important sectors where we have to keep an investment in mind. Now, with reference to a duty foregone cap, we have to understand that this should be amounting to around 6,484. That means this can be with reference to investment amount, right, or whichever that is lower. Next, with reference to eligible expenses, this is actually the expenses that we have discussed right now. And obviously with reference to bank guarantee, right, bank guarantee is required with reference to any investment, correct? And this will be actually be very important when we talk about foreign investors in the country and safeguarding their investments in the country too. Now, when we come to understand which all companies are eligible to actually take benefits of this scheme, these are only those companies who have a global revenue requirement according to the government regulations. Now here, they must be having a minimum of 10,000 crore in automotive revenue, and here they must be having 3,000 crore in global fixed assets. So this generally means that they must be very big companies such as Tesla. And even according to various chief ministers' comments, right, we have to understand that Tesla and all those companies are enthusiastic about entering India, but simply wouldn't because we have high and steep EV duties. And this is where we have to also understand what are the second eligibility criteria, that is the manufacturing commitment. That if they want to export the cars to India, they must be having a domestic manufacturing commitment. That is, they must be starting production within 3 years of approval with a domestic value addition target of 25% for the first 3 years, 50% in the next 5 years. That means that if you want to sell an EV in the country, we must be also trying to have domestic value addition of that EV in India in themselves, because this will be giving more economic opportunities and job and growth for the country. And at the end of the day, with reference to the application process, there is a 120-day window, and this is actually taking a non-refundable fee of 5 lakh rupees. So all those companies who are interested are actually allowed to invest in the country in this particular scheme, and this will be also attracting brownfield investments, that is investment in already existing Indian EV companies, to take ahead or say take the benefits of this scheme. So now we'll be moving on to the next topic. Guys, recently the Paraguayan President Santiago Peña Palacios and our Prime Minister Narendra Modi had a recent meet, and these two countries are poised to take forward the agreements to the next phase. Now, it is very important for the prelims context to know about the various countries, their geographies and the current events. That is why they are in the news. Also, from a GS2 perspective, we need to know into the various policies of developing economies such as Paraguay and what are our interests in the same. Now, when we talk about firstly Paraguay, we first have to admire the geography. Look at the map here. We have the Paraguay country here, and mainly when we talk about the capital, it is Asuncion, that is located on the east bank of the Paraguay river, as we can look at in this map here. The Paraguay river is actually talked about dividing the country into two halves, as you can see here, correct? Also, when we talk about the bordering countries, we have Brazil, we have Bolivia, we have Argentina, and Brazil again on this side. So here, when we talk about the climate, it is having a subtropical climate and a tropical climate, a mixture of both, where we have Paraguay river, the Parana river, and the Apar river, which are the three most important rivers, because UPSC loves to ask you those river-based questions. Now, when we talk about Paraguay and why their geography matters, why we are learning about all these things, because simply when we can look at this map, we have so many rivers in Paraguay, which makes it a hydropower giant. And let me tell you, it is actually one of the world's largest hydroelectricity exporters, with the Itapu and the Yacyretá dams generating most of the hydropower, where they are also strategically located as a buffer state between Brazil and Argentina and Bolivia, where we also have significant investments. You can let me know in the comments what those investments from Indian side is. And also, when we talk about the agri potential in the country, we have to also look into how the various rivers and the various natural resources there will be serving as good import sources too in the future. So that is where the countries are coming together. Firstly, when we talk about the recent talks, the leaders talked about the most important thing right now, that is the talk on terrorism, where both countries condemned the recent Pahalgaon attack, and this is where they issued a joint statement. Apart from this, India and Paraguay, they are hopeful on the recent collaboration in trade terms based on the India-Mercosur Preferential Trade Agreement. Now, when we talk about Mercosur, we have Brazil, Paraguay, Argentina, and Uruguay as a part of this, right? When we talk about these individual member countries, right, these are one of those individual member countries. And when we talk about the major trade partners of the Mercosur, we have China, who is at the number 1. Then we are followed by this United States, Germany, and India. So India is actually the 4th country when we talk about the trade volume between these countries. Next, when we talk about the defense, we are also trying to step up the support that we can do with reference to the police and the internal security of Paraguay. Also, Paraguayan government is actually in awe of our agri-stack, which is a comprehensive digital solution of interlinking our land records, our crop data, farmers data on one single platform, that is the agri-stack, which is actually a part of the digital agricultural mission in the country. And finally, when we talk about forwarding the technology between these two countries, we have cooperation between the space, railways, critical minerals, and energy as a part of the recent talks. Also, a major issue has been highlighted where there have been lack of cooperation between the two countries. Now they have been solved with this new joint commission mechanism, which will be taking place as high-level platform between the secretary or the vice ministerial levels between the two countries to expedite various, aspects, issues between the two countries. And now, there is a question from 2024 prelims, which is why we need to look into these articles, right? And from your perspective, you let me know what is the answer of this PYQ, which is not directly linked to this, but you can actually try to attempt an answer on your own. In the next article, we are looking into the Monetary Policy Committee and why it can have a rate cut in the future for the third consecutive time. Now, when we talk about the Monetary Policy Committee, let us just revise it very quickly. Now, it is actually a statutory body which is actually under the RBI Act of 1934, but it was actually envisaged under the Finance Act of 2016 as a part of the Section 45ZB of the RBI Act. Now here, it is mainly the main statutory body in the country which is focused on inflation targeting, that is maintaining our inflation range within 4 plus minus 2%. That means that in India, we can have a minimum of 2 to maximum of 6% of inflation in the country, and here this is the main body which is responsible for maintaining that via the repo rate. Now, in the comments, can you let me know what are the various other tools apart from the repo rate that the Monetary Policy Committee has to actually administer the monetary policy in the country? Also, at the end of the day, it will be supporting economic growth, because if we try to manage inflation in a convenient manner, we are also trying to manage the economic growth. And at the end of the day, this was mainly formed as a memorandum of understanding between RBI and the government. And here mainly when we talk about this earlier existence or earlier mechanism of MPC, we actually had a technical advisory committee, and this was actually a non-binding advisory committee. But here in this Monetary Policy Committee, all the recommendations here are actually binding with reference to the monetary policy decisions. Now when we talk about the members, we have 6 members, 3 from the RBI. Firstly, we have the RBI governor, then we have the RBI deputy governor, then we have an RBI member who is nominated by the RBI board. Then the next 3 members are actually from the central government, who are generally people from established institutions such as IIM or Delhi School of Economics or leading economists and financial experts. Now, when they actually try to meet and they actually have some discussions, they actually have a particular quorum that a minimum of 4 members must be sitting for the meeting, and they must be voting for a majority. In cases of some tie, the governor of the RBI will have a casting vote. When it comes to the term of the external members that is appointed by the Government of India by the Ministry of Finance, they have a term of 4 years with no reappointment in the future. And also when it comes to the Monetary Policy Department, this is also a specialized department under the Monetary Policy Committee, which is looking into the research, forecast and the documentation aspects here. Now, in recent times, why RBI is cutting rates at all? First try to understand what do you mean by stances of the central bank, and this is very important. Now, imagine that the central bank is forecasting that in the near future, we need more economic growth. Now, if we need more economic growth, we need to decrease the repo rate, because we need to decrease the interest rate so that people will be taking more loans, and people will be taking more loans because the interest rates are lower. And if people take more loans, they will be trying to invest more, and if they invest more, we can have more employment, we can have more profits in the economy, and eventually the GDP of the country will be increasing. So an accommodative stance means that RBI is expecting that in the future our growth can increase, and that is why we have the potential to decrease the repo rate and have more liquidity. Now consider the opposite thing, that is a hawkish stance. Now RBI is saying that there is high inflation in the country. So if there is high inflation in the country, RBI would want the money supply to reduce in the country, because simply too much money is in the hands of the people. To reduce that, let RBI increase the interest rate or increase the repo rate. Right? So if the RBI is increasing the repo rate, the money with the people comes down, because people do not take more loans and they do not invest. Right? And here a hawkish stance generally lead to a reduction in the GDP, because simply people do not invest more in the economy. Now apart from this, we have a neutral stance where the RBI can hold the repo rate to the limit, or means unchanged, or increase or decrease, or have a balanced approach, right? Or the RBI can also, in this other stance, in this calibrated tightening, can actually increase the repo rate, which is a kind of a hawkish stance, but they can also keep it at a steady level, right? Because simply the inflation is at a milder level. Now please note that these are all likely. That means these are all likely events. The RBI should not definitely do all these things. These are the likely events, these are the possible events that the RBI can do, right? Now what are the reasons right now the RBI is cutting rates in the next monetary policy committee meet by around 25 basis point or 0.25% according to the news reports? Because in India we are right now seeing a low inflation. According to the last month's CPI, we understand that is actually stabling at around or less even than 4%, which is kind of normal or good for the economy. Now when we understand how this particular thing will be supporting the economic growth, because simply lower repo rate means that more loans will be given, means that more investments will be done, means that more jobs will be generated. So definitely it will be supporting economic trend, and obviously there is a global trend in the entire world to decrease the repo rates, and even the US Fed is expected to do so. So that is why the RBI should be following in that direction. So based on all those concepts and the recent updates, you let me know what are the answers positively in the comments regarding the 2015 and the 17 PYQs, because unless we practice the PYQs, we are nowhere near to cracking the examinations. The UK government, guys, is right now planning to have major investments under the AUKUS grouping. Now, from the perspective of syllabus, we need to know into the various current events, and also from a GS2 perspective, we need to know into the various international institutions, their mandates, their agencies. Now, here we have this AUKUS strategic alliance. As you can see, this is an alliance between the like-minded countries, the Western-minded countries of UK, of the US and the Australia. So we have members of these three countries as a president of this alliance, which is actually having a trilateral security and technological alliance broadly targeted at the Indo-Pacific region, as you can see here. And also, as we can see, correct, now these countries are located in this Indo-Pacific region, with China as a potential, spoil sport in all those important efforts. So this is where we have to look into the important significance of the AUKUS for the grouping via the two-pillar structure. The first pillar is that, the countries such as the UK and the US, they are trying to supply submarines to the Australian country, because simply the presence of the Western submarines will be drastically increasing the defense fleet of the Australian naval force. Now, this will be arming them, making them nuclear capable, and obviously help them in the entire security of the region. Next, when we talk about the pillar 2, this looking into the technological and intelligence sharing between these countries, these three countries, mainly with reference to share and exchange of AI technologies, quantum technologies, cyber capabilities, undersea technologies, that is undersea cable technology also, and also secure intelligence sharing and networks. So these are the broader things that they are trying to do. But right now, what the UK government has decided is to step up the war preparedness in the region, because simply of the adversities that we are facing right now in the name of China. So that is why, the UK is trying to ramp up or build 12 attack submarines under Pillar 1 of AUKUS, so that they can supply the same to the Australian country. Also, the defense spending will be hiked up to 15 billion pounds for nuclear warheads, 1 billion pounds for cyber capabilities. Also, the Cyber EM Command Center will be set up by them as a new digital command for cyber security and electronic warfare that is increasing in the world right now. Also, with reference to the military warfare, now this will be upgrading the same via military housing infrastructure. And finally, with reference to the Russian threats, also they will be looking into the same. Now, why are we trying to discuss this? Because they have a relevance for our country. Firstly, we have positive relevance. That means India actually is a partner of Australia, UK and US as a part of the Quad Alliance also, where some of the countries are also present. You let me know in the comments who we have in the Quad as Quad members too. But when we talk about India, firstly the main benefit will be Indians will be having more avenues for collaboration in the pillar number 2. That is with reference to AI, quantum, cyber and undersea cables and so on. So India will be having the opportunity to collaborate. Next, it will be also trying to add momentum to India-Pacific economic and the defense build-up, also as a measure to counter China. But on the other hand, because India is left out of AUKUS, right? So this will be leading to increased militarization of the Indo-Pacific, not to India's own demands, because all these things are not brokered by India, or here India is not at all present as a part of these talks. So this can actually increase the risk of military confrontation, because simply the UK and the US is not present in the region, but they can supply the arms and ammunition. But maybe this can fill a potential regional crisis later on. Next, India must also be trying to balance relations with Russia too. And that is why this AUKUS can come as a bottleneck towards this ambition. So that is why India must be trying to balance and have their own regional autonomy based on such decisions. So now we'll be moving on to the final one. Guys, recently the PMI index has been published, and here the PMI is at a 3-month low. But firstly, what is a PMI? Now imagine that you are a manager at a top tier manufacturing company. Maybe it is a steel company. Now you see that, okay, right now we are producing aircrafts, right now we are producing so many electric vehicles, so we need a lot of steel. Now maybe in April you demanded 100 million metric of steel, because you simply demand that, okay, my demand from the consumers is only going up. That is why in May you demanded 120 million metrics. But what you observed in May is that your steel and all your raw materials that your company is manufacturing, that is not selling. So the next month demand, that is the June demand, is only at around 115, or this can be only be at around 121, increased by only some time. So this is what we have to understand, that these managers like yourself at big companies, they make decisions based on how many we should be purchasing with reference to raw materials, with reference to any other equipment. So if over a period of months that we see that the index value is more than 50, that means that there is an expansion in the manufacturing activity. That means we are trying to have more manufacturing because the managers are pushing more orders. So more than 50 value means that we are having an expansion. Less than 50 means that we are having a contraction in the manufacturing activity. In India, as of now, we are at 57.6, which is actually quite high, but actually this is low if we compare the previous months, right? It is high above the 50 value, but it is actually lower. And this particular PMI is actually released by so many organizations, mainly the private organizations, for your information. And it is here the IHS market whose PMI index is most popular. Now, when we talk about why this is dropping at a 3-month low, before you complain, let me tell you that India is actually the first country when we talk about the global PMI, but despite that we are slowing down. Firstly, because of the geopolitical tension between India and Pakistan. Because of this potential fear was there that war will be breaking out, so managers did not place so many purchases. Also, we have cost inflation right now, that is higher cost of materials, freight and labor. That is how the prices of raw materials are increasing. That is why they're decreasing the demand. Also, competition is increasing based on various margins. Next, raw materials are becoming costly, mainly with reference to aluminium, cement, iron, rubber, leather and sand, which are also sometimes imported from other countries. And finally, this high costs of raw materials are eating the supply chain. The supply chain or the operations are becoming strained or very unoptimized. This is why this is at a 3-month low. Now, in this direction, you let me know what is the answer finally of this particular 2008 question, which will be giving you an indicator how a question on PMI will be coming. And with this, I thank you all for being a very friendly and patient audience. Please do attempt the quiz which is following up. Till we meet again, all the best and best of luck. Thank you.